Today, we are talking about Flutter and implementing Semrush calls. Okay, so the first question you may have is, well, our agenda, yes. The first question you have is, what is Flutter? So Flutter is an open source UI-centric development framework developed by Google. And it was released around 2015. And it first came out to help mobile developers quickly develop for iOS and Android applications. And they have since expanded the offerings, expanded the number of platforms you can deploy to. So just recently, they've added a stable web deployment platform. So you can deploy to web browsers. You can also now deploy to desktop applications such as Mac OS, Linux, Windows UWP, and they even have support for embedded. Although implementing embedded is very advanced, but it is an option and a possibility. Reasons why, or kind of highlights of Flutter, some strengths. Flutter is very performant for a multi-platform development framework compared to like React Native or Ionic. It is near native speed. It is, of course, developing native is going to get you the fastest response. So if you're building, very advanced games, for example, that's where you'll see a slight difference. But Flutter is only marginally slower than native, so it's very close. For development, they have hot reloading, which is incredibly useful for iterating through UI, right? Because when you don't have to recompile all the time, and you can just tweak a little bit of UI and then just hit the hot reload button, you can see UI development very quickly. And probably because of that and other things, it is, according to Stack Overflow's most recent developer survey, it's the second most loved framework out there. I think the first one might be .NET. I'll have to double check on that. And the third highlight is that Flutter is written in Dart. So Dart is probably not first and foremost on most developers' repertoire of languages. But if you have, which most people probably have, experience with JavaScript, Swift, or Kotlin, you'll find interfacing with Dart very, very easy. It's very familiar. And the Dart language team has done a great job on bringing Dart from its sort of kind of nascent beginnings to include a lot, if not all, the modern features that you would see in other more mature languages. So yeah, if you haven't touched Dart before, do not be afraid. It's very, very human readable, very easy to follow. Okay, so before I jump into this, no, I'll just keep going. Okay, so the next question then, now that we know what Flutter is what is Semrush calls? So Semrush calls is one of several Semrush products, chat being probably our number one most well-known product. Calls basically simplifies WebRTC technologies and makes it available to your mobile and web applications to run audio and video and audio calls between users or groups of users. Now, Semrush has several SDKs for, of course, both major mobile platforms, iOS, Android, and then also a JavaScript web implementation. And some highlights for Semrush calls is, as I mentioned, you can do one-on-one calls, or you can do group audio, so like Clubhouse type calls, or group video calls, like you would see in, well, so many apps do it now, but like FaceTime, you can do multiple folks. Screen sharing. So screen sharing capabilities is built in, including screen sharing from mobile devices. On-device recording, call history. So the user could see, well, yeah, call history, it's pretty obvious, right? So the history of all your previous calls. And then meta tags or metadata. So you can add custom metadata with the calls that you make to what's the best way to say it? It allows for deeper integration with your own applications, because you can pass data in with that call that then gets read by your application on the receiving end. So you could present like unique overlays or unique functions. And the last thing is Semrush calls is secure. So Semrush is HIPAA compliant, and the media streams for direct calls are DTLS encrypted. Okay, Semrush calls. Now, Okay, what I'm going to do is in the chat real quick. I kind of went through that Flutter and Sember calls fairly quickly. So let me post some links here for you. If you are interested in more info on Sember calls, I'll have to post a link later since I am casting at the moment. Okay. But yes, if you do have a question about Flutter or Sember calls, feel free to put that into the chat window now, and we'll come back to it during the Q&A. Okay, so the real meat and potatoes of this presentation is integrating the Sember calls with Flutter. Okay, so Flutter has a mechanism. Let's see if I can click on this. Okay, so from this graphic, you can see how generally how platform channels works. So platform channels is a communications mechanism that the Flutter team has put into Flutter application builds. So Flutter apps sit within a host platform, right? iOS or Android. And the base application basically just runs what they call a runner. And that runner runs the Flutter application. They've got a little pipe called platform channels that lets you pass certain kinds of information through the channel. So it's very JSON-like. It's got here. So you can pass data like Booleans, integers, doubles, and strings. And then you can also pass lists and maps of those data types. And you can send that to the device from the Flutter application. And you can also receive that information from the native side. Okay, so it's bidirectional. Another interesting fact about platform channels is that it runs asynchronously to obviously try not to block your UI thread. But interestingly, the calls, once they're, when they need to be sent to Flutter, have to be done on the native device's main thread. This generally is not a problem, but something to be aware of if your app is heavily multi-threaded. Okay, and then the Flutter team has gone one step further and provided a type safe option. So platform channels by itself, you have to implement the Flutter element and then the native side independently. And this is how I've done my demo for simplicity. But there is a package that will run through your Flutter code and create a type safe mechanism so that you can talk to the iOS and Android side and the website, I believe, without needing to manually check that all your data types are correct. So anyways, so quite a few options for platform channels. Okay, so the process I'm going to go through in showing this, because we will be jumping through a number of different technologies, is I'll start with the Sember dashboard, and then I'll show the Dart code within Flutter, and then I'll jump into Swift and Kotlin and show you generally how that looks and how you would implement it yourself. Okay, so before I really get into the dashboard side, I want to post this. A link to the repo that I have uploaded code to that you can use or copy. Okay, so this is, I've posted in the chat room the GitHub repo for the project that I will be showing. Okay, so first thing, if you don't yet have a Sember account, you can sign up for one easy enough. Let's see, show you real quick what that looks like. Sign up right here. We have a free 30-day trial. It gives you access to all our products, including calls. And so once you've signed up and gone in, the first thing you will see inside Sember's dashboard is this organizational view. And here, when you first log in, this applications area will be blank. You can create an application here. In our case, we're doing calls, so you would choose chat plus calls, give it a nice name, and choose which one of 7 regions server locations is closest to you or closest to where your clients are likely to be. Okay, so after you create that, you will get something like this. Well, if you're not logged, that was weird. Why was I kind of logged in? Okay, so once you've gone into an application, you'll get this view. And the first thing you'll notice here is the application ID. Okay, so this application ID needs to be passed into either the Flutter implementation or your native implementation to obviously connect it with Sendbird. The next thing you'll need are users. Fortunately, the SDKs will automatically create users if you've passed in a user ID, so we don't need to pre-seed users at all. Okay, so this is that dashboard. This is pretty much all you need to get started, which is to have this application ID. If you happen to be already a Sendbird customer and you've got, say, another chat application and haven't activated calls yet, if you go down here to calls, you'll see an activate button. And all you have to do is click this and click through the next couple screens to turn calls on. So pretty straightforward. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is jump into the Dart code. And
Jason, okay. I think some folks are having trouble accessing the link. Do they need to sign up for something?
Let's see. Oh, let me check to see if we made this. Oh, okay. So problem is I left it private. Let me switch that to public so everyone can get in. Thank you for that.
Now, this is what we call live fixing. I'm loving it.
Goodness. Okay, so everyone with that link should now be able to access that. Sorry about that. I do pardon in advance the code. There's definitely a lot of experimentation in here, and I will be adding and cleaning up to this in the future. So, but feel free to post complaints into the issues, and I'll get to that. Okay, back to Flutter code here. Okay, so when you first create a Flutter app, and here I've got the iOS Xcode up here, you can see this boilerplate that Flutter has created. So this Flutter app, again, is just calling some compiled code that Flutter has created. And on the Flutter side, generally you'll see something like this main .dart file, which is just building the app, in this case, a material type app. And the only thing I've done here different from the boilerplate is replace the kind of the extra code for the default home screen that they have with this simpler just home screen. And what I've done here is I've added the app ID that I talked about earlier here. This app ID. Here, I've just made it a constant, and then I've put in a user ID. In this case, I'm using Tonica. And the reason I've done this here instead of making the app like dynamically reconfigurable is this is going to be generally the kind of use case you'll have for your own app, right? You generally only have one application ID per app, and the user ID will be generally pulled through your own authentication process. So once a user logs in, they have some sort of user ID. You can use that same ID or a dedicated chat ID, and you pass that into the init process. Okay, so we'll come back to that. So everything in the home screen is just for the UI, which we'll see in a moment here. And the real connection with Sendbird, or the platform channels part, is in the Sendbird_channels.dart file. So what I've done is I've taken some of the boilerplate requirements for platform channels and put them here. So the big key part is when you first set it up, is this part here. So platform set method call handler. So what we're doing here is we're basically telling Flutter like, hey, we want to use platform channels. And if we receive some messages from the native side, pass it to this function here. And all this function is doing is taking the method call, which has a string identifier, which is this dot method. And you can basically parse that method and then execute particular functions. Now, the call also contains arguments. So you can see here, call args, and it's just a map of data. So this is set up to receive data from the native side. And to pass data to the native side, you just make this call, platform invoke method, and then give it a string identifier and then any optional arguments. And that's it for sending information to the native side. One other thing is generally for every method kind of channel, you give it a string name, right? So method channel and then any unique identifier. This allows you to have multiple platform channels for different things. So you could have entire method channels dedicated to just chat, to authentication, or however your app works. You can break it up logically. Okay, so this is what it looks like on the Flutter side. On the native side, or just the iOS side, what I have tried to do with the sample app is I've tried to make this as portable as possible so that instead of you having to go in and modify your app delegate heavily, because it's probably already modified heavily, is to just put in a single hook, basically. So I've put everything into this Sendbird folder, and I'm using Swift extensions to basically add functions to the app delegate. So when you call enable Sendbird Flutter, you just pass an application, it's going to kick off 3 separate inits, one for asking for push notification setup, voice over IP setup, and then the Sendbird channels, which is the platform channels. Several of these. Okay, so enabling Sendbird channels. So it looks almost exactly the same as the Flutter end. So here we are calling Flutter method channel, and we just have to make sure this string identifier matches the one that we had assigned in Flutter. Then we assign a call handler, same as we did on the Flutter side. Right? And here it's exactly the same. It's the call method has both a string identifier, which is the .method property, and then arguments that you can parse through. So here, just to start off with, when the Flutter app begins, the first thing it's going to do is it's going to call the platform channel and pass in an init command and pass it in the app ID and user ID we have. We're not using access tokens here. And so when that sense goes across the pipe to the native and it receives the call and we're parsing for init. Okay, we've got init. We're going to take that init and the arguments that were passed along with it, and we're going to actually init Sendbird calls natively. So at this point, all the function calls to init and prep Sendbird calls is exactly the same as we would implement for native iOS or native Android. So all that is handled here. And all we're doing is we're passing the trigger and arguments from Flutter. So once we've initialized Sendbird and we've registered for remote notifications, it should kick off, internally it will kick off the authentication check. But that part isn't critical for the Flutter side. All we had to do from the Flutter side was just go, okay, init the library with these credentials, and now we're ready to go. Okay, so let me run this, or let me show you this running on my here. What I'm trying to do is get to QuickTime. Here we are. Okay, so this is linked to my phone, and I've got this app running there. Oh, of course. So one thing about Flutter is it generally runs in the debug mode, which won't allow you to run on native devices unless you run in release mode. So what I'm going to do is I'll just run in debug from Flutter. While that's loading, I can talk about Flutter a little bit. So you can see here, if you come from Swift or Kotlin, you'll have probably said goodbye to semicolons, but Dart is very dependent on semicolons and commas. One of the great things about this requirement is that it allows for an automatic formatter that constantly runs, which is something I really like, and something I kind of miss when going back to Xcode or Android Studio, where you have to manually kick off indentation corrections. But once you get used to this in Visual Studio Code, it keeps everything very, very clean. And something else that you'll notice to kind of save you from sort of this Lisp kind of conundrum, because Dart is very declarative, you can have a lot of these sort of trailing elements, right? The closing brackets and semicolons. Unfortunately, the Flutter Visual Studio Code plugin labels what objects these are attached to. So when you've got to insert or remove certain widgets, you can track that with these sort of tail markers. And they also have built-in functions that actually makes this very easy, where you can just refactor. You can pull out these widgets or insert widgets on top of and embed these ones. So what would normally be a very contentious, very, very tedious process of inserting and removing widgets becomes very, very easy. Okay, you can see here that when you rebuild, it can take a little while. Usually it's a little bit faster, but I think it's because I have about a dozen applications running at the moment. Let's see. In the meantime, I can show you the Android component. So on the Android side, I am not as proficient with Android development as I am with iOS, but I tried to maintain the simplest setup that I could as well. So here I've just got setup channels and then dispose of channels. And here I've got setup channels in the main activity, but I'll probably move it back out just to simplify things. Oh, okay, so this is older code, but this still works. But you can see here, same deal. We're creating a method channel with the name that has to be the same as the one used in Flutter and iOS. And then it just parses through, or we've got this function that receives the calls and parses through exactly the same, right? Looking for the dot method, string identifier, and then accessing the call arguments. Okay, so my device is finally ready. Here we are. Okay, so you can see a very simple UI. I wanted to reduce the number of pages, so I have everything crammed into one. Here at the very top, it just says what the connection status for the user that I hard-coded in, which was Tanaka. So green means good to go. If it was red, that means it couldn't either connect to Sendbird or the user didn't authenticate for some reason. Okay, so what I will do is on my device, not on my computer, I am going to call user A. Now user A is moderator I've created in Call Studio. So one of the great features of our dashboard is we have this thing called Call Studio, which lets you make calls or receive calls from devices or applications that you have integrated with Sendbird calls. So right here, in this list, this is listing all the direct calls that I've done in the last couple of days. You can see I've been doing quite a bit of testing. And in the lower right, this tiny purple button, you click on that, it will give you this UI for making calls. So when you first set this up, when you first set up Call Studio, you have to create a moderator account that basically is this user account. And so the user I've created is just user A. So on my device, sorry, I'm skipping around here a bit. So on my device here, I'm going to call. And you can hear it ringing. And on the Call Studio in the dashboard, I can reject it, pick it up. If I pick it up, you may start hearing echoes. Yes, okay, so I'll turn that off before it gets totally crazy. But yes, you can see that the calls from the device are making it to the dashboard just fine. Okay, so now, so we're kind of nearing the end of the main part of this presentation, but real quickly, I'll talk about how to receive calls. To receive calls, you need push notifications enabled. So To enable that on the native side is the same as you would for registering for push notifications for any other native application. The extra step in our dashboard is you will take the same push certs and you will put it into the chat notifications service here by adding a certificate. And also here in calls, adding in call credentials for the Call Studio to work. If you haven't done push notification certs before, it's not overly difficult. Just show you how real quickly to do it with Android. Android is actually quite simple. So Android, you will go to, say, your Firebase console, which is probably the easiest way to do push notifications for mobile applications. You go to your console, go to the app that you have created for your app, and go to cloud messaging. Here, you're just going to take your server key, copy this, put it into here. So add credentials, paste, and that's it for Google. Of course, don't forget to put the Google services info.json file that Google requires you to put into your Android application. That file can be put anywhere in your app, but it does need to be dropped into the folder for it to be built in when the app is run. iOS is a little bit trickier. iOS, first you find the identifier that you want for your app. So same process, you create an app in Apple's developer account, or you let Xcode do it for you. But then you find that app in your developer account. You go to push notifications, edit, and you've got to create a certificate from your keychain. Let's see if I can pull this up for you. So you bring up your keychain app, you go certificate assistant, request certificate from a certificate authority. You put in your email address that you use for your account, save to disk, don't email it. And wherever that file is saved to, you take that file, you upload it here. It will create a downloadable SSL certificate. You download that. Once you have downloaded that, you go back to Keychain, you find that certificate, and then you right click and you export it into a .p12 file. You take that file and you put that into the dashboard here. Okay, so we do have documentation on that whole process in our docs, and I'll be creating a video soon on going through that, because you can very easily forget some steps along the way. But getting the correct cert in is absolutely paramount to getting push notifications to work. Okay, so if everything is set up correctly, then you will hopefully have a situation like this where you receive incoming calls. So keep that off. And you can see here, receiving call from Moderator Alpha. So the user ID for the Call Studio is user 8, but the name I gave it was Moderator Alpha. So then I can pick that up, hopefully pick that up. Yep. And I'll stop that before the echo gets crazy. And that's it. So that's how you get Sendbird calls working into a Flutter application with all kind of the bare minimum features. So this is just again to highlight, it is bare minimum. So it gets the calls going, but it doesn't make use of all of our call features. That is something I plan on slowly adding over time. Okay, so that concludes the meat and potatoes part of my presentation. I'm going to jump back to the chat room to see what I have probably missed. Okay. All right, so everyone's got access to the GitHub account. That's great. Oh, okay. Thank you, Todd. That's great advice. Use it on the on to store. Oh no, do it in the on stop, I think. Okay, I'll look into that. Okay. If I think I got all the questions from chat, which yes. Okay. So if you have any other questions, feel free to unmic, or you can continue putting chat. Oh, let's see. Gang Ho, you've got a question. Maybe it's follow-up session plan for a video call. Follow-up session plan for a video call. Oh, Yes. So that is something I will add hopefully in the future is group calls, which is implemented quite differently from direct calls. And then video calls, of course, would be super fantastic. And then showing all the different features like switching between cameras, switching audio feeds, call recordings, that would be useful, and then all that stuff. So those are things that I'm hoping to add slowly over time. But the sample app that's at Sendbird Community is what you could use to get started with the basic direct calls in your own Flutter applications. Cool. Okay, I'll give it a few moments for, oh, Kunal, will the recording be shared later? Yes. So after each Code Cafe, we take the recording and we clean it up a little bit and then post it up on YouTube. But you should also, everyone here should also be getting emails after the fact with a link to it as well. Is that right, yes. Tanaka?
Yes, everyone wants the recording. So only next week, everyone will get, once we've done processing it, everyone will receive a follow-up email.
Cool, excellent. I will post one link if I can get this thing. So next, is it next month? We've got another event coming up. Let me go back here. Yes, okay. So Rich Mironoff, who's the founder of Product Camp and the author of Art of Product Management, will be presenting, hold on, my secondary screen is refreshing very slow and I can't quite get the link.
I posted the link in the chat, Jason.
Oh, did you post it already? Thank you so much. It's taking me forever to highlight this thing. But yeah, that event will be happening, is it next month?
Yes, it's in October.
Oh, okay, so end of, well, yeah, we're still in September. So yeah, end of next month, Rich will be presenting. So yeah, if you'd like to join that event, definitely sign up for that. Is there any Flutter package for implementing Sendbird? There is. For Sendbird Chat, we have a native SDK plugin. So hub.dev is where most everyone publishes Flutter packages. And if you look here, you can find our Sendbird SDK here. This is our officially supported chat plugin. And you can see other people have, let's see, so this older one, which I'll get rid of, this was an early plugin that I created that uses our platform API for pushing chat. Okay, it looks like some other people have published some, that doesn't look like Sendbird at all. But anyways, yes, so this one right here, Sendbird_SDK. This is the officially supported chat SDK for Flutter. React Native is a Facebook solution. Yes, you're right. React Native was originally developed by Facebook. I believe React Native is open sources at this point as well. But yeah, Flutter and React Native are probably the two most popular cross-platform development frameworks currently on the market. And yeah, people are usually strongly for one or the other, but whichever works best for you, I say go with that one. I personally like Flutter, which is why I'm giving a Flutter presentation. Okay, I think that is the only event information that I have to share with you guys. If oh, we are always hiring, so if you're looking for a change and want to work with some great folks, definitely check out our careers page. And my contact info is here. This will also be sent out in the email. So if you have follow-up questions or comments, feel free to reach out. Is there a free trial for Sendbird calls? Yes, there is a free trial for Sendbird calls. So when you first sign up, you'll be given 20 credits to use for making calls. And so when you first sign up, the credits will appear. Let's see if I can get there. Will appear here. This is a test account, so I have many credits to play with. But every free account is given 20 credits. Awesome. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day and great rest of your September.